from a pure idea all the way to market.
And if you put the wrong team in early, then you're just, you're going to fail soon.
And a good idea today might not be relevant 5-10 years down the line when technology does change a little and shift.
Welcome back to another episode of the BYU Tech Transfer Podcast. Today we have Mike Wong with us. Mike Wong's from Espiritu currently, but he's got a very diverse and storied past. So Mike, do you mind maybe filling us in a little bit on your past and how you got to where you're at right now?
Sure. I actually graduated from Park City High School.
Nice.
And went to the University of Arizona and got a degree in industrial engineering.
Okay.
From there, I came out of school and started making trash cans.
Really?
So I was a trash can engineer.
Okay.
So I worked for a big injection molder in Los Angeles.
Right. That was my next question. What kind of trash cans? But injection molded.
Injection molded trash cans, the one people have in front of their houses or apartments,
Okay.
that the 65, 95 gallon rollout carts, we call them.
Right.
So we have big 2,000 ton machines. So I came out of school learning how to process injection molding machines, and then got into designing trash cans for cities, reusable containers, Coke and Pepsi crates.
Okay.
Milk crates, if you ever go in the supermarket and see
Right,
milk
right.
stacked in those big rectangular crates. So I started my career designing plastic products for the food and beverage industry.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one thing, like as an engineer, sometimes you don't know what you're going to go into, but I know people who are like specialists in like paper clips, or hinges or whatever it might be. So trash cans, plastic crating,
Plastic,
that's very cool.
reusable containers.
Yeah. Very cool.
I think I always had a passion for the environment and
Yeah.
didn't want to create more waste. So
Right.
it was an easy one to fall into.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I did that for about 4.5 years, and I was just getting bored sitting behind a computer screen.
Right.
I got a few patents and I felt accomplished, and I wanted to try something new.
Yeah.
So I ended up opening a nightclub.
Okay.
Yes.
A big pivot from, designing, plastic reusable containers, trash cans into a nightclub.
Yeah, I actually read a book called Zen and the Art of Making a Living.
Okay.
I think it's by Lawrence Bolt, and identifies personality characteristic traits.
Right.
And at the end of the book, one of the options was open a nightclub.
Okay.
Because I liked people. I like
Yeah.
being social. I
Yeah,
like seeing happy people. So I got my best friend and my brother. I saved up some money. We invested. We designed, built everything in this bar, nightclub, except for the electrical and plumbing.
Okay.
And it was the first smoke-free nightclub in Park City
Yeah.
at the time. And we had a pizza kitchen inside.
Very cool.
And we owned and operated for about 5 years.
Okay.
And then as I was getting a little older, it was hard to stay awake late nights. And
Right.
so I ended up selling that.
Okay.
Got back into product design, was helping friends design and engineer products for their companies.
Okay. And so you're just doing this kind of personally on the side? I mean, maybe full-time, but...
Right. On the
Yeah.
side, I set up an LLC and was
Right.
running it that way. And then from there, I got into I was also mentoring.
Okay.
So there's a program called the CAPS program, Center
Right.
for Advanced Professional Studies. A lot more high schools are picking this program up. But my physics professor in high school, Charlie Matthews, asked me to come back and become a mentor.
Okay.
So this program gives juniors and seniors in high school hands-on experience.
Very
Everything from business to architecture to engineering. I think there's even some healthcare tracks now.
Yeah. Very cool.
So I was a mentor there, and one of the first projects we started on was teaching students how to take an idea from a pure idea all the way to market.
Okay.
And one of my mentors, a guy named Peter Roberts, he's a Masonic genius. He's really good with concrete and was developing a lot of cylindrical shapes using concrete. So the important thing about spheres, cylindrical shapes, is they're a lot more efficient than a rectangular shape, houses and whatnot. So for instance, if you were to take, say, this room we're in, or someone's bedroom that they live in, right? If you cleared everything out of it, assuming it's rectangular in shape, and you made the walls, the ceiling, and the floor out of red concrete bricks, okay? Nothing in the room, just red concrete brick structure.
Right.
If you fill it up with water, now assume all that water is enough for 4 people to live off for a year. Okay?
Yeah.
If you take the same amount of concrete bricks and reconfigure it into a sphere, you'd have enough volume for enough water for 5 people.
Okay.
So spheres have more volume with less surface area.
Right.
So that's the power of the sphere.
So it's basically the most efficient way to capture volume is in a sphere.
Exactly.
Okay.
Most it's energy. That's why raindrops fall; they turn spherical.
Right.
Planets are spherical.
Yes.
Our eyes are spherical.
It shows up all over the place.
There's something to it, right?
Yeah.
So we were, imagine if you had a home in a hurricane or tornado-prone area, tornado alley. The problem is a lot of times these hurricanes, right, and tornadoes, you hit these 90-degree. You hit these flat walls, flat surfaces, so it has to hold a lot of force, and houses blow away, disintegrate. With a spherical shape, right, the wind will go over it. So spheres are actually it's a stronger structure, more durable.
Well, and this intuitively makes sense, right? You don't see really any right angles in nature, right? And we tend to do it from a engineering and manufacturing perspective because that's what we're good at, but it's not efficient, right? It doesn't protect you from wind and damage and those types of things like a sphere would.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the goal was, hey, how do we educate or build a product to teach people about spherical geometry and the benefits of it and maybe have fun with it? So we decided to create a toy.
Okay.
So we designed, think of like people that grew up with Legos, very linear, right? Right angles.
Yes, stack. A lot of blocks, yes.
A lot of blocks. Legos, Lincoln Logs, and they're great creative toys, but you're thinking very linearly.
Yes.
So we created a spherical building toy that allows, kids, adults to create with spheres and curves.
Right.
And hopefully the goal was to change kids' mindsets at an earlier age.
Yeah.
So
and give them experience playing with a sphere, right? You spend all your time playing with blocks. It's not unnatural to think you're going to think of designing things in block-like structures.
Correct.
Right? So transitioning that to a sphere early on might help them think of things a little bit differently later in life.
Exactly.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So try to educate them through fun and play.
Yeah. Very nice.
So we ended up doing so I worked with 3 students, Nina, Paige, and Gates, and we designed and engineered a spherical toy. We got a patent on it. We did a Kickstarter project to raise funds for our first production run. Yeah. And I made them a promise that if we raised enough funds for a Kickstarter campaign, that I would actually focus on it full time as my next career move.
Yeah. No, that's great.
And
did you guys raise the funds?
We did.
That's amazing.
We raised $26,000, which was enough to get the tooling.
Yeah.
And our first production run.
Very cool.
So we manufactured that here in Utah.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. So molder called Silicon Plastics in Logan.
Okay. Are they still in business?
They're still in business.
Oh,
yeah.
Very nice.
And one of the stipulations I had was with this project or product, if we either had to make it out of a sustainable material or a recyclable material. Okay. So we used recycled HDPE. Nice. It's pretty common plastic.
Yes. Yes.
And it was a 5-year path, and we got into over 1,000 retailers.
Very cool.
We did a licensing deal with PBS Kids, got onto Whole Foods. So. And we ended up selling the company.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And it was fun. It was gratifying, and we got a product out there.
So as part of that mentoring experience, I mean, obviously it sounds like it went really, really well for you mentoring these students. Yeah. But what were some of the common misconceptions or maybe points that you found yourself telling the students about to help them in this development process? Because this was part of the CAPS program, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Well, obviously the CAPS program, when the CAPS program ended, these students were still part of the company.
Yes.
Everything takes a lot longer than anticipated.
Absolutely.
Numbers look great on spreadsheets. Ideas look great on paper.
Yes.
But the execution can take a lot longer than you think.
Yeah. And did you find that was disheartening for the students, or did they, as they grew with it, did they kind of understand that was the natural progression of it? I think they understood. Okay. Right. You try to explain as much as possible, and you lay out both the optimal outcome, and then you also lay out what could go wrong. Yes. Right. You lay out the risks and what would happen. And we actually had our first patent attorney. He did not do what he said he was going to do. Okay. So we basically we stalled out for 6 months. Right. As the patent attorney kind of left town, and we had to find a new patent attorney. And start that whole process. Over. Things happen. And those are things that you never want to happen. You never plan for that to happen, right? For your patent attorney to bail on you, but it does happen pretty regularly. I feel like every startup, every entrepreneur has that story of something huge that blew up in their face and they had to pivot or figure out a way around it. So something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. So you guys sold that company, and then where did you go from there? From there, I started working for a carbon fiber company here in Salt Lake City, Rock West Composites. Had
I was an engineer for him, and then managing production, and then I got into business development.
Nice. Right.
Yeah, working in a manufacturing environment during the pandemic wasn't the most enjoyable.
Right.
And I actually had an opportunity to work on a biodynamic organic farm.
Okay.
An acquaintance, she's a naturopathic doctor.
Okay.
And she always wanted to grow her own medicine. Ashwagandha, echinacea, tinctures and whatnot.
Yeah.
So she had just purchased 40 acres of land in Peoa. And I went up to the property and it was beautiful.
Yeah.
The stream running through, and this was during the pandemic as well.
Okay.
Right, so I can work outside.
Right, didn't have to mask up outside and all those good things.
Exactly. Yeah. And I told her my background, and I said, hey, I can help you design and engineer the infrastructure.
Okay.
But I don't know anything about growing food.
Right.
And her response was, don't worry about that. We're going to hire a couple of really good consultants.
Okay.
And you can learn from them.
Yeah.
So I felt very fortunate. We had some amazing consultants. I learned how to plant, how to seed, how to weed, everything that had to do with growing. So we had outdoor grow, we had an indoor grow in a greenhouse, we had a grow dome, and for 2 seasons I helped them get the farm up and running.
Amazing.
We grew enough food for 10 families, 10 CSA boxes.
Okay.
And it was a wonderful experience.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So,
and that's a huge departure from what you were doing previously in terms of agriculture versus the manufacturing and product design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in the back of my mind, I always had the passion to learn more about food production.
Of course. Yeah.
I still believe a lot of our communities, we need more local food production.
Right.
But
yeah,
that's another story. So.
Okay. And then from there, what happened there?
And then from there, I wasn't working for a few months, and my wife's said, you need to find a job. And I said, you're right.
Find something to do. Yeah.
Find something to do. And I was going back through my mental Rolodex of people I really enjoyed working with in the past and things I like doing. And Theodore Espiritu came to mind. He's the founder of Espiritu Design. He was
and that's where you're at currently.
That's where I'm at currently.
Okay.
Yeah, he was an adjunct professor at the University of Utah.
Very nice.
In the multidisciplinary design. Disciplinary.
Okay.
I was
we'll go with it. That works for me. Yeah.
And he founded this design engineering firm.
Very nice.
So it's been around for about 15 years, and they specialize in bringing physical products to life.
Right.
So if it's a physical product with technology, they can design and engineer it.
Okay.
So they do things for the healthcare industry. They also do things for the U.S. Air Force. Right.
Yep.
And it's a small team, but with a lot of impact.
Right. Oh, that's great.
So he brought me on to start a venture studio.
Very nice.
And essentially a venture studio, we help out entrepreneurs and inventors that have good IP and maybe not enough capital to design and engineer their product to a licensing event or to get it to market.
Right. And this is a very common problem that a lot of, especially solopreneurs run into, right? Where they have a good idea, but maybe not enough capital to actually get it to the finish line or to a handoff point.
Right. Most solopreneurs start out that way.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I think I might be looking at one right now.
You might be.
Right.
Got a lot of side projects I'm working on for sure.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, no, so that's great. And so your career has spanned a lot of different industries and expertise. You've worked for yourself, you've worked for others. Do you have any highlights, preferences? I mean, working for yourself, I think, is very fulfilling, but it also comes with its own amount of stress, right?
A lot of stress.
Versus working for others, which still has stress, right? It's not no stress, but maybe it doesn't feel like it's all on you. Do you have a preference or insights there, or just thoughts?
I think they're all good.
Yeah.
Right. It's all an experience.
Yeah.
Which you get I like variety in life.
Yes.
So I think working for a company, day in and day out could be good to learn.
Yes, absolutely.
And especially if you're working for a good cause and the vision and the mission of the company is
and something that you're passionate about.
Yeah, if you're passionate about it, that's great.
Yes.
But I chose to go a couple different paths just to learn and explore.
Yeah.
Working for yourself is extremely gratifying, but it's a lot of work.
Yes.
And people talk about this. It can be lonely because you start off by yourself.
Yes.
Right. If for some reason you can get a partner to help you, that's amazing.
Yeah. And I think that's why there's such a focus sometimes in entrepreneurship of finding that co-founder for you, right? That person who's going to, on the days that you're down, right, maybe a little discouraged, be up and help kind of pull you up, and then vice versa, right? On the days they're down, you can help pull them up.
Yep.
And no, it really comes down to your personality and your situation, what works best for you. But I think finding those individuals in your life who you would be willing to co-found something with can be something to keep in the back of your mind.
100%.
Yeah.
The top 3 reasons startups fail: one, they normally run out of cash.
Yeah.
The second one is there's no product market fit.
Yep.
And the third boils down to the team.
Yes.
You either don't have a team or you have the wrong team in place.
Yes.
So that support network is huge.
Yeah. And if you put the wrong team in early, then you're just, you're going to fail sooner.
Right.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. Okay. Well, tell me a little bit more about the product that you have here. Do you mind showing it off for us?
Oh, sure. I can. So yeah, this product, right, it starts off as and I can talk more about the iterations or how this project progressed, but it's a simple piece that in the injection molding world is made by an open and shut tool.
Okay.
So it's very efficient, and it's all made out of recycled HDPE, and they slide together, right? So the more pieces you put together, you can actually build a spherical shape, but then you can actually interconnect them, right, to build all sorts of different geometry. So really let your imagination roll, but the goal is starting off building a sphere and then a ring, and then there's a bunch of different games you can play.
Yeah, very cool.
So this started off like this was our first iteration, right? And then we realized that if we put symbols on the underside of these pieces, and as you're creating something, we can actually teach kids the concept of coding, right? Because it's all about variables. So when I was learning algebra, the concept of a variable was very hard to grasp.
Right.
5x plus 2, equals 12. Like,
yes.
what is this x? I think I can figure it out because the math, but a variable, just coding, relating something to something else.
Yes.
So the next iteration of the project was, we launched a coding set where we had the symbols that were made large, and then there's a booklet in here with different builds you can do based off the symbols.
Based off of the code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's trying to teach kids, K through 5, the coding, off-screen coding.
Yeah. Well, and that algebra analogy is so important because I know when I was going through algebra, lots of kids, they just really struggle with understanding like what is X, right? Or what is Y, or how is that representative of something else? So if you had been playing with a toy, early on, it's helping kind of you understand that concept. By the time you get to algebra, hopefully, it makes a lot more sense to you.
Right.
Yeah. Very cool.
So it's morphed a little. And then we ended up selling the company to another local manufacturer. And here's another business, I guess, twist in how things work out. So we sold it to them. The pandemic hits.
Right.
We got cash for it up front, and then we were also getting royalty payments.
Okay.
The royalty payments stopped coming in.
Right.
So we go down there, have a talk. What's going on?
Yeah.
Turns out they were making pickleball paddles.
They pivoted into the demand.
They had about 20 different product lines.
Right.
So they were making pickleball paddles, selling them to Walmart, making tons of money.
Yeah.
And they said, basically, we don't have enough time to focus on your project anymore.
Oh, wow.
So I'm like, okay. Can we have it back?
Right.
So essentially negotiated a deal.
Yeah.
Bought the IP back.
Brought it back, yeah.
Didn't start manufacturing, but because of technology changes and what's going on in the current market, I started talking to another, internet personality, someone launching a line of characters who's really interested in now buying it and using it to support their product line.
Oh, very nice.
So in negotiations,
to
resell the IP for a different use.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I think it's a really good example of what happens behind the scenes sometimes with products like this and intellectual property. I think in your mind, it can be this really clean interaction, right? I develop a product, I do this thing, I sell the product, I make money, and I move on with my life. When in reality, there can be a little back and forth, right? Things change. You have a pandemic, which changes people's priorities, right? But you still want to move things forward. And I think that's a great example of something that we deal with a lot in tech transfer, right? Where we'll have intellectual property, we might hand it off to somebody, they might be, using it in a business that then pivots into an industry where that technology is no longer relevant. So then it comes back to BYU and we end up in the same situation. So very cool. Yeah,
IP is interesting.
Yes, it's very interesting.
Right, and a good idea today might not be relevant, right? But you'll have maybe 5-10 years down the line when technology does change a little and shifts, it makes that IP more relevant or more accessible.
Yes, which seems counterintuitive sometimes, right? Because we will see like manufacturing process improvements, as an example, as some intellectual property that we have. And it doesn't become relevant until the industry kind of matures to a point where it needs to adjust its tooling or change how it's doing things. And then all of a sudden that IP becomes very relevant, right? And so it's counterintuitive to think that the most cutting edge leading technological research isn't in the most demand, but then it will be 5 years from now when it's older than it was when it first came out.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So anyways, no, I'm glad that you see the same thing, because we see that all the time.
Yeah. And for cool. Like young entrepreneurs, inventors, or just any inventor, right? Don't give up.
Like, yes, exactly.
Because you never know where it's going to go.
And you can't control the timing. Right. And that can be really hard, where you want it to be successful today or next week or next month, when in reality it will be successful at the time that it is meant to be successful. Super frustrating sometimes.
Super frustrating. And you got to understand the market too, and the buying patterns.
Yes.
In different marketplaces, and when they can buy, when they can spend money.
Right. And I think the pandemic kind of threw a lot of things off, but it did show that even with something like that, it downturned certain industries or certain products. But then you saw like pickleball as an example, right? Like exploded, right? It was just right time, right place. And so if you were in that industry, that was your right time. Even though it was a horrible event that nobody wanted to go through, it was advantageous to a very select niche of products.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting.
And now pickleball's huge.
And now pickleball's huge. It doesn't seem to be going away.
Right.
Very nice.
Are you a pickleballer?
I like to play. I'm very bad and I don't play enough. So yeah, but it's fun.
All right.
It's really fun. I'd rather play it than tennis. I think most people would agree with that, unless they grew up playing tennis.
Sure.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, we've talked a little bit about everything at this point, but maybe coming back to hardware and some of the development that you've done there. So what common mistakes do you see early entrepreneurs make when it comes to developing their hardware for their startup?
I think when entrepreneurs put in features or make assumptions about what their hardware needs to do, without really understanding, hey, who the end buyer is, who the end customer is. Does the customer really want this feature?
No.
Are they willing to pay $5 more for it? There's a lot of assumptions that are made early on that shouldn't be. Or you can make assumptions, right? But
you have to make some assumptions.
You have to make some assumptions, but then test them. And a lot of these tests are pretty easy and painless to conduct.
Yeah.
And it's hard because when you design something, when you create something, it's your baby.
Yeah.
Right. And
you put your heart into it.
You put your heart into it.
When people criticize it, that hurts you personally.
Yeah. So maybe advice: have thick skin.
Yes.
And be willing to listen to your customers and really figure out what is it you're designing.
Right.
Why are you designing it?
Yeah.
Right? And is it needed? Is it solving a problem?
Yes, absolutely. And give me your thoughts on this. One thing that I've been leaning into lately with some of my own personal projects and things that I've done is releasing things before I feel like they're 100% ready, so that I can get that early feedback before I've invested too much in any one direction.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, yeah.
And if people are afraid to do that because they think someone's going to steal your idea, right? That's where provisional patents come in.
Yes, and we talk about this a lot on the podcast, just having a patent strategy and intellectual property strategy, right? Which is different than having a patent that's fully granted and allowed by the U.S. government, right? Those are very different things. So understanding the tools and the levers you have at your disposal to have a good IP strategy versus waiting until everything is complete, the patent's been granted, and now we're going to show it to everybody.
Right.
Yes. Okay.
Exactly.
Great. Yeah. And the other thing that I found is that when I release things early, it does exactly what you're talking about, is that it eliminates a lot of the assumptions that I had and gives me concrete feedback on the features or the aspects of the product or project that I'm working on that truly are needed by the market, which ultimately allows me to pivot into that. And I think you've seen that in kind of your own career as well.
Yeah, and especially in the role I have right now with the venture studio. Right?
Yeah.
We work a lot in the healthcare space.
Okay.
And we work with a lot of doctors and caregivers.
Yeah.
Right. They have an idea, they have a new product idea, or they want to modify something.
Yeah.
Right, because they think it's going to do the procedure better or have better outcomes, and most of the time it does.
Yeah.
But we'll always show it to their peers as well, and really dive in and do a lot more observational research into what is truly needed. Maybe they're missing something. Maybe they're, research professors and caregivers. They're brilliant, right? They're experts in their field.
Yes.
But sometimes they also fall fall prey to just the tunnel vision.
Yes.
Of this needs to do this because, and you know, if you do a little more research or get a couple more opinions, right, you can find a small tweak is what really needs to happen for a really successful project to
And do you ever find those small tweaks help with maybe overly niche solutions, right? So I'm thinking of a surgeon who maybe their biggest problem is something that they deal with all the time, but it's really hard to extrapolate that out into a group of people who could actually be seen as a market. Do you ever see like small tweaks to really good ideas within a specific niche, allowing it to be more broadly applied to a larger market?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, definitely. 100%.
Very nice. Yeah.
100%.
I think that's a good reminder too, because if it's your problem and it's your pain point, it's easy to jump to your solution and the thing that's going to make you feel the best. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be a viable product on the market, right? And so if you can broaden it out with a few small tweaks, I think that's always a good piece of feedback to hear when you release some of those products early.
This actually reminds me of, so the Department of Defense actually acquires a lot of products that are commercialized for the public sector, right? And sometimes the requirements are just slightly different. So maybe if you can design a product to incorporate some requirements, some additional requirements in the beginning, right? You actually have a broader market as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So
coming up with some dual uses, right, for those products, where maybe it has some military application, but there's also a consumer application in just the general market that's different from what they're using it in the military, but both, you know, help your product fit a broader market for sure.
Right. And it could be a healthcare product for the military. Yeah. Maybe it's the only change is you need the encasement to be a waterproof. Right. Or like, so there's always small tweaks that that you can make to open up the market.
Very cool. Very cool. So when individuals come to Espiritu, do you see any common misconceptions that they have about the overall process of creating a product, designing it? Is there any common through thread, or is it pretty scattered?
I think the most common misconception is time.
Right. People, and we talked about this a little bit.
The speed at which one can design, engineer, and bring a product to market. Yeah. Right. You can do it very quickly in the software SaaS space, but when it comes to hard tech, physical products, things take a while. Yes. Right. If you're injection molding a product, after you design and engineer, which can take up to a year, maybe it takes even longer. Right. So even after you're done iterating through the design and engineering process, right, and you have a product that's ready for manufacturing, right, then you have to get the tooling. Right. What is it going to take? Is it thermoformed? Is it injection molded? Are you machining a part? Right. What's the process? Yes. And it takes some time to set up that process. Yeah. Okay. And maybe if you're manufacturing overseas, and say crazy tariffs are imposed. Right.
Things that you have no control over whatsoever.
No control. Yes. And maybe those tariffs are changed weekly. Right. That's a little more delay as well. Yes. So how well can you control manufacturing, and then maybe you have to bring it back to the States, or maybe you should plan on bringing it manufacturing in the States. So there's just a lot of variables. Yeah. So the misconception that product design, engineering, and development is fast. Trying to set realistic expectations. Yes, is one of the first things I try to do with Inventors. And
no, I think that's great, and I think it's really insightful because going to school, right, you're judged on, you know, how perfectly did you do something, and did you have that long-term vision, and you need to have long-term vision for your products. But sometimes if you get too nitpicky about how things should go, right, you start trying to solve problems that you're not encountering yet. And so you need to solve those near-term problems, right? Like, what's the next thing that I need to do to move this into the market or move it to the next phase of production? And then as you do that, you'll find that some of those long-term problems that you thought might be there don't show up, right? Right. And so you end up solving only the problems that you need to get your product to market versus trying to solve problems that may be a problem 6, 10, 12 months from now. And as I say that, it sounds like I'm saying, like, don't think long-term. That's not what I'm trying to say. Think long-term, think about the product market fit, all of those good things. But don't try to solve the problems that may come up 12 months from now by trying to make a decision today that may or may not be relevant to what's going to happen 12 months from now.
Yeah. I think you're stay focused.
Yes, stay focused for sure.
Create a plan and stick with it.
Yes.
And you might have to pivot, but
yeah,
stay focused.
You
and
almost always have to pivot, right? In some way or form. But yeah, stay focused.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Well, we're running a little short on time now, but we do want to thank you, Mike, for being here. Do you have any parting thoughts for any early entrepreneurs, first-time founders, people in their mid-career who are maybe looking to shake things up a little bit? You shook things up in your career several times. It seems to be working out pretty well for you. Any kind of parting thoughts for the listeners?
I think if you have an idea or a passion to do something new, take the chance.
Fantastic.
Right?
Yes.
Life's short.
Yes. Take the chance, right? When you're 80 years old looking back at your life, you're not going to regret the chances that you took. You're going to regret not taking them.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you again for being here, Mike. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.